I'm so excited to have all of you with us this evening. And we want to welcome sisters and associates from St. Louis, of course, but also Albany and St. Paul. And we have some ministry partners with us tonight from Denver. Mary Lysering, lovely to see you. Minnie Cassell. And I'm not sure, I'm not sure if Wanda and Clarence McDavid are in yet, but they had hoped to attend. And we are here this evening as members of the J.O.E. Educate subcommittee of our justice, our larger justice committee. And would all the members of the J.O.E. Educates group kind of wave their hands, please? I know there are 5 or 6 people present, and then members of the larger committee, people like Mary Flick and Linda on your trip on the way in. Thank you. Thank you for all the work that you do. And we'd like to recall that we are here as part 2, really, of this session. A month ago, we listened to Father Christopher Kellerman speak about slavery, Catholicism, and lessons for today. And he gave us some clear language on which to hang some very difficult truths and to look at what slavery has wrought and what still survives today. And we know that as Catholics, we in a particular way carry this legacy and have a responsibility about repair. And so tonight we're so excited to have Tamara Rhone with us to give us some language and understanding, to begin that work. And Tamara is a Denver native, a church member with some of us. She's taught in the classroom for 45 years, has a degree in political science and a master's in educational administration from Colorado State, has taken additional courses from all over the country. She is CEO of Tamara Rhone, LLC, which focuses on educational consulting and curriculum development. And she is curriculum developer for Reparations, for the number 4, slavery. She's a member of the board of directors of the Denver Black Reparations Council as well. She's received many awards, and there's a link to her bio. So I'm not going to read them all for you, but one that calls to me is that she was recognized for her work in education and was installed as the Queen Mother of Development for the village of Aburanza. She continues to work toward improving the quality of education in that village. She enjoys her family. Her daughter Amber is a mental health practitioner, and she has traveled in many nations. And one of her favorite settings would be the sandy beach with the palm trees and the tropical islands. So anyway, Tamara, we are so excited to have you with us tonight. We thank you in advance for coming, and we don't want to take any more time, so we ask you to take it away.
Well, thank you. And I apologize for the lighting. I don't know, the computer things with me, it's always an adventure. It is an honor to be here. Reparations work is my passion. I loved my teaching career, and they dovetailed very nicely. So I'm pleased to be here. One of the things I think that we wanted you to do was we had sent some homework over. And so if you have a moment, if you could put just, a couple of sentences, 2 or 3 words about what you may have learned or thought about the things that you read in dealing with reparations. So while you're putting those in, I just want to say I often have found in doing this work that the word itself can tend to be very off-putting. And so I hope through this presentation, when you get finished, that fear will be diminished and you'll see that there's a lot of positive work that can be done that's not threatening. It's recognizing the history and trying to make a positive difference. So if you can put those in the chat, we can talk about those things as well. Are we ready to do slides, or do you want to cover that first, Sarah?
Yeah, you're welcome to go with slides. Were
Okay.
you wanting me to run them, or
Well,
did you
yeah, I
wanna-
thought you were running them. I can run them, but I'm not listed as a co-host.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Yes, I will. I can do that. Okay. Is it not allowing you to share? Oh, I see here. I'll let you. So you should be able to share now.
Yeah, I can share screen.
Okay.
Now, let's see. Okay, let's see here. I just saw Wanda's comment in the box, and yes, they were in DC. All of those slave owners were paid reparations for the loss of their property. Can you guys see the screen? Do you see my slides?
Yes. We're just we see all of them on the side, and then
Yeah, I'm trying to, I don't know, there's something up here. Let me, hold on. For some reason, your bar is blocking. I don't know
yeah,
why
it does
is.
that. I don't.
Yeah. Okay. I think it'll be okay now. Let's see. Are you good?
There you go.
Can you see
Yep.
it okay? Okay.
Looks great.
Perfect. All right. I have the typical 40 acres and a mule and HR 40, which we'll be talking about. So Ida B. Wells says the way to right wrongs is to turn the light of truth upon them. And that's what we're going to do this evening. So obviously this is a depiction of maybe that 40 acres and a mule. The definition of reparations, it refers to the process and result of remedying, excuse me, I'm sorry. I've got pictures in here of everybody and I can't see my slides. Let me see if I can hide it. No. I apologize. Okay, I'm trying to figure out how to hide the background of the people so I can just see my slides. Because I can't.
Okay. If it's easier, I have your slides up. So if it's easier for me.
It might be.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Let me know when you're ready for me to go to the next one.
You could go to the next one and probably the next one. Next one. Thank you. So reparations refers to the process and result of remedying the damage or harm caused by an unlawful act. The recognized forms of reparations are variably understood as restitution, compensation, rehabilitation, satisfaction, and guarantees of non-repetition. And you'll see that again. It is from the Oxford Dictionary, but it comes from the United Nations. Reparations are a form of repair for past harm. It also, though, can deal with present as well, and I'll explain that. Reparations in terms of equity is understanding since slavery that there's been continual racial inequality, and that's from Dunham. Next slide, please. So this is my definition, and I thought that this cartoon was quite appropriate with it in showing how it continues today. Reparations are a road group to repair past wrongs to a marginalized group. It is the idea of acknowledge, address, redress, repair, and don't repeat it again. When we establish an equitable footing, we all achieve, and it benefits all of us. And so I just say that it's creating awareness to make positive change for all of us. Next. So the United Nations has these 5 areas of repair, which you have heard. Restitution, which includes restoration of liberty and human rights and the return of property. Compensation for damages, including physical harm, as well as lost opportunities and earnings. Rehabilitation from the health and psychological effects of enslavement and institutional racism. Satisfaction, cessation of human rights violations and abuses, establishment of truth-seeking commissions, public apologies, and the establishment of sites to commemorate the history of enslavement, and guarantees of non-repetition, the reforms that are needed to ensure the prevention of future abuses. And what you'll find is that the abusers tend to end up being abused as well. It harms all of us. And we continue to see that today. And we would be a much better place if we could repair this. Next. The enslavement of people of African descent began on this continent long before the creation of the United States of America. The thing that I found most disconcerting when teaching African American history was showing my students how our plan of government, the Constitution of the United States, actually upheld enslavement in its document. Article 1, Section 2, the 3/5 Compromise, which is essentially made enslaved people 3/5 of a person because they wanted them to be counted for taxation and representation. The Commerce Compromise, which limited the power of the federal government over commerce by forbidding them from taxing exports and limiting the control of the trading of slaves. Article 1, Section 9, Congress could not prohibit the importation of enslaved persons from Africa to the United States before 1808. The tax per head on those imported could not be more than $10 per enslaved person before 1808. And Article 4, Section 2 said that, which was the Fugitive Slave Clause, stating that a runaway upon being caught must be returned to the owner in the state from which he or she fled. The term slave is never used in that document. They use things like such other persons and phraseology like that, but you know what they're talking about. Next. So when we say, oh, but it was in the past, it doesn't have anything to do with us today. This cartoon tells you they talk about reparations are a bad idea and that we're not responsible. I hear people say, well, we didn't have any people that were living here during that time. They came after the Civil War. But when you look at these other things, none of us are excused. Next. Next slide, please.
I'm sorry. Okay.
So why reparations? Marginalization of people of African descent in this country heightens to keep control whenever that power structure is threatened, from designated subhuman chattel property status to making it illegal to read and write, the forced rape of women of color, selling away and breaking up family units, curfews, and many other social, political, economic, and emotional controls. As a result of the deep divisions within the United States, the Civil War was fought as part of a quest to determine control of the political, economic, and social structures of a country historically based on the enslavement of individuals. The outcome resulted in the ending of the official institution of enslavement, but marginalization from Black people in America continues to this very day through a myriad of structural means. Next, please. So why reparations? Here are some of the examples that you can look at, from sharecropping, lynching, land theft, medical apartheid and experimentation, environmental racism, predatory loans, redlining, voter suppression, racial profiling, police brutality, mass incarceration, income wealth gap, gentrification, and the lack of equal access to quality education and job opportunities. Next. So you have, you've probably heard of the triangular trade, where we actually had, triangular trade from, say, starting in England or Portugal, wherever you like, down to West Africa, across the Atlantic Ocean, to this part of the world, whether it be America, Brazil, so on, and then back up to England again to get the manufactured goods. So that was the triangular trade. The new triangular trade that we find is you have manufactured drug laws, and then that creates inmates, and they go into private for-profit prisons, who then go back to those groups that get donor dollars to go into those political seats to continue that process. Next. So this is the response from the United Nations Secretary General regarding reparations. And you can see his entire speech. I have the link there. The Secretary General pointed out that much of today's racism is deeply entrenched in centuries of colonialism and enslavement. He emphasized that it is especially important to recognize historical injustices, repair longstanding wrongs, and reverse their consequences. End quote. Next, please. So it feels like America needs to give us a promissory note. They have done it and not followed through on that promise. Next. So many people say, well, you know, there was 40 acres in a mule. So here's the real deal on 40 acres in a mule. In January of 1865, General Sherman did issue a special field order number 15, where he said that they would allot no more than 40 acres. And they then said that they would give a mule to help work that land. There were approximately 40,000 freedmen that actually were granted that 40 acres in a mule, and it was from lands that were confiscated because, remember, the Confederacy lost the war. So this was part of their punishment, was taking that land, and it was primarily along the coastal areas of South Carolina, Georgia, and northern Florida, what we know of as the Sea Islands or the Gullah Geechee Corridor. President Lincoln actually approved the order. The problem was President Lincoln was assassinated. Andrew Johnson, who was his vice president and from the opposite party, he was also a Southerner who was a small slave owner, actually revoked that field order number 15, literally within less than a year, and said that the land was to be returned to its former white slave owners. So the opportunity to correct a large portion of that at the time did not occur. Next. So many people say, well, you know, Black people have been here long enough. Why don't they just pull themselves up by their bootstraps? Well, the idea is, first of all, you have to have some boots to have some straps to pull up. So this cartoon says, what bootstraps? Because systemically, if we lack the education, the economic viability, and so on, if you don't have the tools, you can't do it. Next. So these are some examples of past acts of reparations, because I do want you to understand that this is not anything new at all. In 1862, the District of Columbia did a Compensation Emancipation Act where they actually paid enslavers, the slave owners, for their loss of property. And it granted them the equivalent of $8,000 in today's dollars for every slave who was freed. Japanese Americans who were wrongly interned during World War II, there was actually an acknowledgement of wrongdoing and a formal apology by the government of the United States, and approximately $1.6 billion were paid to survivors. Is that sufficient? That's always up for debate. But the acknowledgement was there. I don't know, you can talk about that among yourselves. The largest compensation program in the world was implemented by Germany as a result of the Holocaust. The first thing they did was outlaw the Nazi Party. They also have acknowledgement and education about the Holocaust. They built monuments and memorials, as well as disseminating money, including an initial $7 billion to Israel. And it's been estimated that the German government has set aside more than $90 billion for Holocaust survivors. They're still paying reparations. The other thing that I found interesting, if you look, Australia with their First People, their Aboriginal people, the same thing. They issued a formal apology, and they do have a very comprehensive education program about the past misdeeds and the misdeeds that they have done in their history against their First People. And with all of these, it does not mean that it's perfect or that it has completely solved the issue, but these are simply examples of where it was extended. Next. So when we say, you know, oh, it doesn't affect us now, if you're looking at education, in this case, you see the suburban high school kid who has more money per pupil spent, almost double what the poor district in the inner city would have. And so it says reparations, but all the injustice was in the past. Well, we know that it was not in the past. And even with the pandemic, we can tell by the effects of the pandemic and the achievement gap that it is much greater with children of color as a result of not having the equipment needed to continue that education, whether it was the ability to have computers, whether they even had Wi-Fi, things like that. Next. So HR 40 seems to get a lot of press. This is the federal government's efforts, and it was originally introduced in 1989 by Congressman John Conyers. He did introduce it every year during his time in office, and many times didn't even go into committee. We've actually made more progress since Congressperson Sheila Jackson Lee has introduced it. but we still haven't gotten it to a floor vote. We've come close, but have not. And of course, with what I'm seeing right now, good luck. But Commission to Study and Develop Reparation Proposals for African Americans Act. The commission shall examine slavery and discrimination in the colonies and the United States from 1619 to the present, and then recommend appropriate remedies from there. And they will identify the role of the federal and state governments in supporting the institution of slavery. They will identify the forms of discrimination in the public and private sectors against freed slaves and their descendants. And they will identify the lingering negative effects of slavery on living African Americans and society. They will identify and educate the public about their findings and recommend actions to address the findings. Nowhere in there does it say that every individual will receive a check, but people seem to be very fearful. So I thought it was very important for you to understand what is in that bill, because the biggest basis of it is that it is there to study the issue and offer recommendations. And I think they asked for $14 million to do that. Next. So S40, Senate Bill 40, is the Commission to Study and Develop Reparation Proposals for African Americans Act. It's been brought forth by Senator Cory Booker, and it is a bill to address the fundamental injustice, cruelty, brutality, and inhumanity of slavery in the United States and the 13 colonies between 1619 and 1865. They want to establish a commission to study and consider a national apology and develop a proposal for reparations for the institution of enslavement. And it's subsequent de jure, meaning by law, and de facto, meaning in fact, racial and economic discrimination against African Americans. That would include redlining, loan, the impact of not being able to get loans and so on African Americans. And they want to make recommendations to Congress on remedies and for other purposes. Next. So we'll look at slave economy, income inequality, and reparations. Next. So these are some examples of current reparative actions. What has happened is that you have found other institutions and states, some towns have decided that, HR 40 has gone on, but that they can do acts of repair in conjunction with or separately from what's happening on the federal level. So these are more current reparative actions locally. So Evanston, Illinois, and sometimes they don't necessarily use the word reparations because that puts fear. But as part of a plan of repair, they committed $10 million funded by their marijuana sales tax. And they've been giving housing grants out to people for $25,000 to help repair or, for a down payment for property and so on to start building generational wealth. Asheville, North Carolina issued an apology, and they resolved to invest in areas including affordable housing, business investments, healthcare, and education. That really sent a lot of ripples, and they've had a lot of stops and starts, but that was voted in, and they're working on it. Georgetown University, which you all may have heard about, the 272, I actually know a descendant of the 272 that I've worked closely with. It is a formal apology. I don't know if you all know that 272 enslaved Africans owned by the Jesuits, they needed money and they sold them, we call it selling down the river, to Louisiana. They were enslaved in Louisiana. And so as part of this apology, the student body voted to increase their student fees to benefit the descendants of the 272. So admission preferences given to the descendants, you have to, of course, be able to get in, meet the requirements, but their preferences given. There are 2 buildings that have been acknowledged for and renamed for enslaved persons. And the person that I know actually, she went back to school for a while, and then she passed that on to her grandchildren. So this formal apology is trying to repair what was done there. And it's been very interesting to watch the emotional damage that was done when some of these descendants found out that, their relatives had been sold down the river. Harvard University is creating a $100 million endowment to address systemic educational inequities. They have formed a study committee, and they've recommended the creation of summer programs with students and faculty from HBCUs. So they're doing some collegial work with that. There's some other things they need to do. They have some photographs of people, and it's caused quite a bit of controversy. And these were enslaved Africans that had their body parts photographed and used, and their descendants are saying this is humiliating and that it needs to be returned. So they still need to do further work. Manhattan Beach, California. There was land that was bought by a Black couple. Many of you have probably heard of Bruce's Beach. It was bought in 1912. It was seized in 1924 through eminent domain. It actually was returned to the descendants of the Bruce family, which really was huge. Governor Gavin Newsom signed the bill to return the property. The latest is the family then turned around and sold it back for $20 million. I'm trying to still figure that out because it was assessed and appraised at 80 million. So, yeah, we could discuss that. Okay, next. Where do we go from here? Reparations as a form of repair can mean many things. Most people immediately think of writing a check, but it can be that and much more for African Americans, including one of the big things that I have seen within one of the groups that I belong to is many people of color just want their information. And so if families have slave schedules, because we were not considered human beings, and so we're listed as property, and we're trying to find our family members. You can go into plantation houses and see, for example, Magnolia Farms. You can go and you can see a family tree that goes 60 generations back, and yet we're lucky if we can get 5 or 6. So we want slave schedules, DNA information, and family history on sites like Ancestry.com, Our Black Ancestry, FamilySearch.org, which are all great things. My daughter got a DNA hit on Ancestry.com. We were so excited because it is my great-grandfather, whose gullah. He was born on a rice plantation in Georgetown, South Carolina. And I know he was listed as mulatto, and I know, the dipping and skipping there. And so what happens is I'm excited because they have what they say is his potential father. Well, I know that it is a white Southern family. And of course, they have their family tree listed as private. But the DNA is proving out that he's related to that person. It's possibly, and I'm trying to find that family. I don't want a check from them. I don't want property from them. I'm just trying to find out who I am. And so that's why we're asking about sharing information. Contributing to and or working with historically Black colleges and universities, HBCUs. Contributing to nonprofits focused on reparative acts, including payment of land taxes, tuition payments, school loan payments. We've had many reparationists. I know one reparationist who identified a young lady and helped her get a bank loan to purchase a townhouse, set her up with that, help pay off her school loans, and so on. So you can do individual acts of repair in that way if you wish. Contributing to historic land or building preservation. Contacting local, state, and national political figures to support reparative legislation and acts. And contributing to the establishment of monuments and markers across the country, citing contributions and recognizing significant sites pertaining to African Americans. I know one lady who is working very hard to try to have Black revolutionary patriots recognized in this country, and she's working very hard to try to get a monument commemorating that, I think in North Carolina. Next. Where we are born into privilege, we are charged with dismantling supremacy. Where we are born into struggle, we are charged with reclaiming our dignity, joy, and liberation. And that quote is by Adrienne Mary Brown. Next, please. So these are a partial list of organizations, and hopefully there's some way that you can get these. It's a very partial list, but these are some of the reparations organizations. I would like to mention, because if you're in I know if you're in Colorado, Mayors Organized for Reparations and Equity, our former mayor was very involved in that. There were, I don't know, many mayors. I think there were about 16 of them that got together, and their mission was to basically do forms of repair locally within their cities. The Denver Black Reparations Council, of which I am a board member, we actually have an ally group, Reparations Circle Denver, that works with us, and they do a lot of the fundraising. We have Black serving, Black led 501c3s that submit applications to the Denver Foundation, and we read those applications and we award money for various things in the areas of health, education, urban farming, mental health. There are a lot of areas that we have funded. Another one that I have followed since I was a teenager, a late teenager, is in Cobra, because it's one of the older ones. And they kind of set the template. So I find their work very interesting. Reparations for Slavery, if you go on to that website, is probably one of the best resources. And I must publicly thank Lottie Liebdula, because she single-handedly puts this website together. And if you have a question and want to know anything, whether it's land, I mean, she's got a full economic thing, lessons, everything. It's one of the most comprehensive websites I've ever seen. Next, please. This particular website, the best thing I would say to do, because I don't know that this website is still up, if you believe that the federal government should establish a Federal Reparations Commission by executive order, meaning the president has to do it because Congress hadn't gotten it done, then you would want to call the White House comments line and tell them that you are in support of the establishment of a Federal Reparations Commission and that you want the president to sign that into executive order. Next. Those are my citations, and you feel free to make copies however you need to. Next. Is that the last page, isn't it?
Yes, sorry, I was
Okay,
unmuting
can you
myself.
click off of that, please? And I will, if you unshare, I'm gonna just give you some of my closing thoughts. Thank you. So, I want to tell you a little bit about my trajectory in this. I was born and raised in the Catholic faith. I was baptized soon after birth. I made my first communion at the age of 6. I was cocooned in my Curti Ars family, but my world changed in 1964 when my parents sent me to St. Mary's Academy at the age of 9 to begin my 4th grade year. They did it amidst much unrest in the Denver public schools. The district itself was in preparation for litigation, which would become known as as Keys versus Denver School District Number 1. It was particularly embarrassing because we were the major northern state that ended up in federal court, the first one. Buses were burned. It was ugly. So imagine a 6-year-old baby, Ruby Bridges, not integrating. People say, oh, she integrated. No, one child does not integrate anything. But she desegregated a public school in Louisiana. And imagine her being viewed as a monster by the white mobs, yelling obscenities, death threats, racial slurs, throwing tomatoes and eggs, things like that, all because she was trying to get a public education in America. Imagine a crowd in Little Rock, Arkansas, made up of white housewives, businessmen, and workers in a frenzy, screaming death threats and racial epithets at a group of students that were simply trying to attend a taxpayer-supported public high school. Their parents were paying taxes for that school. It created such a degree of mob violence that the National Guard was nationalized to protect those students for a school year. And then the schools were closed for a year after that. Those are just 2 examples of what those crowd viewed as monsters and Black society viewed as our babies. My treatment at St. Mary's Academy was certainly not to that degree, but I experienced racism and discrimination. There was a teacher that said daily, she stood outside of her classroom in the hallway each morning and greeted me with, "You don't belong here." My dance teacher at school was saying that I would never earn toe shoes because Black bodies are not made for ballet. When I earned them in private lessons, I was sternly admonished by that teacher, and I was not given any major parts in the school recital. I was relegated to the last row during all of her dance classes. I never made first or second row at any time at school. My sophomore year, there was a huge fight between several Black students against a white student because they had called one of the Black 8th graders a Congo cookie. And then they later called her the N-word. It was not addressed until the second incident. Fortunately, that white student was asked not to return the next year. My junior year of high school, almost all of the 12 Black high school students ran and won class office positions. I was class secretary, and one of the nuns accused us of rigging the voting machines. So I am very aware of my African roots. We come from a communal people. Survival and growth depend on being responsible and helping others. My Catholic upbringing taught me much of the same, that I am my brother's keeper. But then I learned about enslavement, oppression, suppression, Georgetown University, and all of that has thrown me for a loop. Yet the following have occurred. Some slave owners were paid for loss of property. German reparations continue being paid to Jewish people in Israel today. The United States apology and reparations were given to Japanese Americans. Australians have acknowledged and are addressing their wrongdoing for First People Aborigines. Canada has apologized for their treatment and systems of cruelty against their First People. But the mention of repair for Black people in America is met with so much opposition. Oppression and suppression continue. Look at Florida, Texas, Mississippi, Tennessee, and more. Voter suppression, employment, discrimination, dismantling of diversity, equity, and inclusion, police profiling, murder, high incarceration, undereducation. So in closing, the following forms of reparation do exist: restitution, compensation, rehabilitation, satisfaction, and guarantees of non-repetition. They follow an individual or a collective and an inclusive approach. It is important that we take a look and consider and take action to heal a very sick nation. So I thank you for listening to me today. I appreciate your attention. I'm all done with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamara. We are about at the time, we do a couple Q&As, but we are at the time to go into breakout rooms. Do you still want to take a couple Q&As, or do we want to go ahead and head into our smart group?
I'm happy to take a couple of questions.
Okay. If anybody would like to, we'll just probably take a couple. If you would like to ask a question, you can type it in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand, we can look for hands and call on you if anyone has a question.
And I can't see everybody, so if you can watch for me, I'd appreciate it.
Jerry Rauch.
Thank you, Tamara. That was excellent.
Oh, thank you.
My question is, we know that our own government hasn't done anything to address reparations or acknowledge the need for it. But is there any, besides the Jesuits and Georgetown, has the institutional church made any, the American institutional church made any
Efforts?
Inroads in this? I mean, I know the Pope went to Canada, and I know that piece with the
Yes.
Native Americans, or the Native peoples there, but it seems like we could model something.
Well, and I think it would be great. And the thing is with the Catholic Church, it's so much bigger than us, because the Catholic Church is one of the major players with the Treaty of Tordesillas. And, the fact that they didn't want Spain and Portugal to go to war, I love the hubris that the Pope just divides the world in half. So you take this half, you take this half. So really, the Pope should be the impetus for all of this. And, maybe that's a place, if you're talking about the Catholic Church itself, I'm thinking that's a great place to start, is to appeal to him. This one seems to have more of an ear for things like that lately. And because they need to at least acknowledge, is the first, to me, now this is just me, my opinion, an apology will go such a long way. I'm looking at the healing that's being done with the 272 and hearing stories about, because that's some great repair. Not only have you acknowledged, apologized, but you're paying tuition for their descendants, which will build generational wealth.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think there are a lot of ways we can work on that. Does that help start?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Another
Thank you,
question?
Jerry. Rose and Gabe, were you wanting to ask a question? I saw you had a hand raised.
Yes. it seems to me, and my question is this part of reparations to stop the ongoing harm that's being done today? I look at the Kansas City public education system, and it's abominable.
Yeah.
Are you on the Missouri side?
Yes.
I just buried my uncle a few weeks ago. I don't know if you all are familiar with the Kauffman Foundation.
Yes.
Yes.
My uncle is the one that created and carried out Project Choice.
Oh.
His name was Tamara Rhone. And to me, with the Kauffman Foundation, what a beautiful way to help
Yeah.
with that, because literally, I was down there for 3 weeks because he was in the hospital and then in hospice and passed away. I had testimony from dozens of students that called saying, he changed my life. This program changed my life. These were kids that had no possibility of affording any kind of college. They didn't even have it in the realm. And he's like, you know, you're smart, get the grades, stay pregnant free, gang free, drug free. They paid for everything from trips home for holidays to and from school. They literally had a crisis team available with a crisis hotline. If a kid was in trouble, they got on a plane, flew to the school and helped out. And the program is one of the most comprehensive, amazing programs I have ever seen in the country. And if they don't do it anymore, and it's like, I know he's not here, but boy, if they could have foundations do that, can you imagine the repair that can be done and the breaking that cycle of poverty?
Mhm.
Y'all
Yeah.
have one of the best examples ever.
Mhm. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm.
And do know Kansas City is not by themselves.
Yeah.
Education is a hot mess these days.
Mhm.
Okay, I think we'll get ready to go into our group discussions, into our session, into our breakout rooms.
Okay,
Tamara, if you would like to talk about the task.
sure, I will. So the idea is, I know I've given you a lot of information tonight to think about, but again, just with the things that you brought out, if you could think about reparative ideas, some type of reparations program or proposal that you would put together, and how would you carry it out? Okay, just some simple ideas, you know, that you might, it could be a big idea. Hey, I'm all for it. So the more heads, the better. So in your group, you're going to come up with a reparative program or ideas and how you would carry it out. Are there any questions? I know, no pressure, huh? We've only dealt with 400 years of it here, and I want you to come up with it in about 5-6 minutes. But I know some genius is going to come up with a solution.
Are we
Okay.
assuming like limitless funds, limitless influence?
Yeah, but my thing is, yeah, sure, but where are you going to get those funds? Where are you going
Okay.
to tap them in? I have an idea. I'll tell you at the end for some things, but I want to see what you have to say. For those of you that are already back in, if you will take your best and jot it down in the chat in as abbreviated form as you can, and we'll try to grab a couple to talk about.
We've already put ours in the chat.
Yay! We pull it down.
You
And
know,
I think
Sister Marion
we have
had
everyone
us-
back.
Okay, I see the last statement I see was from 6/31. Do you have more on yours?
Frankie, did you put that in, or was that from Jerry?
I put it in.
Okay, it's not coming up.
Oh.
Is it still in your chat?
Let me look here. Yeah, I said, start
it-
with our own boards, faculty and staff. The board asking questions and calling for accountability. Our boards need to have more diversity. And who is calling for the accountability?
Oh, that's
Okay.
really good.
It's
Really
not
good.
coming
Can
up
you
in the
co-
chat.
can you
Maybe
cut-
try hitting,
Copy and paste it. Can you
yeah, or
copy
hit
and paste
enter.
it
I wonder
again?
if it's just not going in.
That's really good.
I sent it through at 5:45.
Oh, okay. Oh, you're at a different time. I was like 5. Forgot you're in Nevada.
So that would be
6:45.
6:45 my time, 7:45
Yeah.
yours. Now, I don't have
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, it's not in there. I'm not sure if and say
And it may be because
you
it
can
was done while you
email
were
it to me if
still
you
in
want.
the, yeah,
Okay,
maybe because you
I'll
were still in
retype
the
it.
chat.
I'll retype it.
Okay, I wonder if you can copy it, take the cursor, copy it and cut and paste it. Again.
Let's see, select all.
Yeah, we'll be fine.
Copy.
Frankie, I can copy it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I try to copy and paste, but it just wipes out.
That's interesting. Does
Yeah,
it say
'cause
you
that
see
was
it on
really
yours,
good.
Marion?
I just sent it.
There we go.
Oh.
Well, let's see. Here we have recommend
with-
club education. Begin with the world in me. Tuesday. Yes. Warmth of Other Suns. Oh, those are phenomenal. There's a tiny book called Laying the Foundation for Local Reparations by Cam Howard. That's good. David Ragland, I think, has some writings that are out, and David Ragland is really good. It's Ragland. There are a lot of them, and I can. I'm happy to send a recommended book list.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Let's see. And I will be fair because there are some reparationists that I don't agree with. For example, like I told him, I said, I don't look the way I do because of a love match. So when you have those reparationists that are saying who's black enough, come on now. Mine has come down from generations. It's from the slave master. So you're saying that, we had a law that said the 1-drop rule. So, it's not an easy answer, but Darity, I'm not well, that's just me. But oh, these are good. I am loving it. Can everybody see the chat? So book club education, Between the World and Me, and so on. Yeah, that's great. And also on reparations for slavery, there's a lot of history education that you can pull. Write a letter to acknowledge. Flood the Pope. Good, good. Formal apology. Oh, perfect. Yeah, okay. And one of the recommendations I would make is doing your homework about it's beyond enslavement. It has to do with schools, all of these different institutions, medical, hospital, things like that. The criminal justice system, so education, health disparities. There are a lot of different areas where you can address things.
Could Redmond or can you copy down all these things that have been written in and
Yeah.
post for us or
Yes,
Thank you.
in the chat, and we'll save it, and then we'll send it out with a follow-up email.
That would be great.
And we will include the links that are on the slides, or on Tamara's slides. We'll include those with the follow-up email rather than the whole presentation, just because some of it is copyrighted. But no, we will include the links from her presentation in the follow-up email as well.
Oh, I love this, whoever ML is.
Mary
I
Lystring.
Okay, I love that, because I used to ask my grandmother, why does Jesus look like that? Because he doesn't look like that to me.
Uh-huh.
I
Well,
love it.
our group came up with talking about seeing the face of Christ in everyone, but
Right.
also understanding that here in Denver, we started a group, and Frankie is a part of that group where the title was a ministry, I should say, Black Lives Have Not Always Mattered.
Yeah.
Because when you say Black Lives Matter, a lot of times you'll get someone saying all life matters.
Right. Oh,
So
yeah.
that's why we came up with I came up with Black Lives Have Not Always Mattered.
That's
And
correct.
the whole idea was to be able to listen to everyone's story. And because once you get to know a person or know their story, you look at that person differently
Right.
than before you knew what was going on.
Mhm.
And the fact that we wanted to try each day to make a difference, even in just one person, whether it's a smile or whether a hello. And we talked about the importance of when you're listening to other stories, that you're not making judgments, that you're really listening,
Right.
and you're listening with your heart. And you're not saying, well, her parents did this or her generation did this, but we all have those stories where different things in our environment, different things where we lived affected us in ways that may not affect the other person.
You're absolutely correct. I'm putting in the chat the name of a book that I think is so important. It's called Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, and it's by Joy DeGruy. It's
Okay.
not a new book, but it will give you an understanding of the damage that not only is done, but it carries through for generations.
Right.
And it's very powerful. It's one that I required for my students to read when I was teaching. There was one that I keyed in on. Oh, the Black AF history. I'm reading that. I just got that. I'm going to tell you, it is outstanding. And I love the title, because I think people will take a second look because they see that and it's like, oh, so I couldn't wait to pick it up. But it is an outstanding book. And that's, Jerry, thank you for that. That's in your chat. And
I will, but I would bet that most people here don't know what that means. I think it's generational. It might be a white thing too, but I didn't know what it was. I had to ask my young friends, who quickly told me what that meant. And I'm like, oh, okay, I got it.
yeah, it's the way for them to
Could
communicate.
you repeat the name of that book, please?
It's called Black, and then the capital A, capital F. In fact, here, I'll show you a picture of it. Hold on. I've got it right here.
While she's doing that, the author was just here in St. Louis. The Left Bank Books brought him, And
Michael Harriet.
he just spoke here in St. Louis and we went to hear him.
Oh, I
And
bet he was phenomenal, wasn't
he
he?
was. And you know what's really sad afterwards? I mean, we are so polarized. We walked out of this lecture and this young black woman stopped me and she said, "Excuse me, do you mind if I ask you a question?" I'm like, "Sure." And she goes, "Why did you come to this?" And
Yeah.
I was embarrassed. I thought, wow, she just thinks that like there are no white people that would care enough to know what's in this book. And I just said, well, you know, like, because I work on this issue on racial equity and I felt like I should come and hear what he could teach me. But, you know, I'm like, that's pitiful. That's just
Yeah.
pitiful of our city.
It is sad, isn't it? We've had our area, there's an area in Denver called 5 Points that's been gentrified. And we've had questioning. We have the Blair Caldwell African American Research Library, which is a part of Denver Public Library that's there. And we also have the Black American West Museum that has been down there for a long time. And it's a historic house that it's housed in, the Justina Ford House. She was the Black baby doctor. The history is amazing. And like I tell my kids, you don't just limit yourself to African American history. You need to take all history, because if it's like pieces of a puzzle, and if you understand the history of everybody, world history, you know, whatever, when you understand it, it'll give you an understanding of how the world works. Well, it's the same thing. So to me, and I've had diverse classes, it's very important that non-Black children also take Black history, because I think that it creates this awareness. There have been people that have questioning why they still need to have the African American Research Library and the Black American West Foundation in 5 Points, the historic Black area that was known as the Harlem of the West, why it should still be down there. And, you know, what do you say? You just, that's when you know you need to take the class. I hope people are looking in the chat, because I love this Buy Black for Christmas. Yes, there's a lot. I love that Target is carrying brands now. Listen to stories. And I think that's great. Listen to stories, share stories, because that helps to demystify things. Ask questions. It's okay. Yeah, Head Start. Oh, yes. Yeah. Isn't it interesting how sports teams can make billions upon billions of dollars, but we're not worried about educating children? And I don't care what color they are. Because like I told him, I wasn't told that you're just supposed to teach Black children or you're just supposed to teach white children. I was taught to teach all children. And they're all my babies. They'll tell you that, even if they are in their 60s now. Some of them are great grandparents. I'm like, ooh, some of them have more hair, gray hair than I do. I'm like, good. Because you gave me this one. No. Are there any other questions or comments? These are some really good ideas. I love it. How did you feel about the breakout groups? Can I get a comment or two? People are on mute.
Yes, they'll have to unmute themselves.
Jerry, did you say something?
I'd say I have several coming off mute now.
Yeah,
so-
I'd love to hear what they thought about it.
Right. Barbara Jennings, do you want to share?
Well, first of all, we thought the presentation was so excellent and
Oh, thank you.
new information for some of us. And that was very valuable too. And let me see, I think actually Joan Coucher was going to present for our group. We looked at the Missouri tax credit program for education and for public education, because I really think this is where so important is starting kids when they're 3 and 4 years old and 5 years old. Parents as Teachers programs, the Teach for America. And here in St. Louis, we're supposed to have a lot of money left over when the Walmart Kroenke family sold the Rams from St. Louis, and we still haven't spent a lot of that money. And it seems that it would best go to education.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity, isn't it?
And someone in our group, I think it was Phyllis Bardenheier, volunteered to find out if our own bishop has ever issued a formal apology for slavery in St. Louis. We do know that some of the priests here had slaves, some of the women's communities. I don't think CSJs did, from what I understand from our historian. How are our high schools integrating? We do still have 2 or 3 very well-run Catholic high schools. And so all of these are things that we kind of took on as more learning for ourselves. We do have a racial justice task force and a full-time staff person who works for the Archdiocese.
Okay.
And she is African American and is doing a great job.
Excellent.
Yeah, so that is a plus. And I think she was there with the present, with the past bishop that we had. And the present bishop has been here about 4 years now, I believe. So we do have a wonderful woman, Joyce Jones, who is leading that department and sponsors quite a few activities for us.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you. Okay.
We
I'm
also
gonna
have
send
a wonderful high school called Cardinal Ritter, which is Black students.
Cardinal.
Cardinal Ritter, Ritter.
Okay.
He is the Bishop of St. Louis who integrated the Catholic schools in 1948, I believe.
Gotcha. My stepdad, I don't call it integrated because it was just he and his sister desegregated Bishop Ward in Kansas City, Kansas, way back in the day. Because I think he graduated from high school in 1951, maybe. He always teases my mom because my dad died when I was 9, and my stepfather and my mother married 2 years later, but they went to preschool together. Both coming from Catholic families, and my mom, they wanted to skip both of them, went to both sets of parents because they're both really bright people. And so my grandmother allowed my mother to skip a grade, but my grandmother Dwight, my stepdad's mother, said no. Well, you know what? He's 5'4" if you stretch him. So I don't blame him because, you know, he would have had a tough row to go. He was so tiny. But I laugh because he's never let her forget it. But he's the one that went to Bishop Ward. She went to the Black high school in Kansas City, Kansas, Sumner High School, and he went to Bishop Ward.
Yeah, I've heard of both of those schools. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we have time for maybe one more if they'd like to give their feedback.
Okay.
Anybody would like to share a comment if you want to? I know there's some unmuted, but if you'd want to raise your hand. Frankie, I saw you were unmuted too. Were you?
Oh, no, I was just going to say we had an excellent conversation, and Sister Barbara Moore had brought up the points that I put in the chat, which I hadn't even given a second thought to, but she's absolutely correct. It starts at the top. If they're in our boards, we need more diversity. We need people that are going to hold those measures of accountability. And that's where it starts, at the top.
Yes, you're absolutely right.
Thank Thank you.
Well, it sounds like
Right.
the chat groups went well and that there were a lot of great ideas that came out of it. And that's the thing. If people put their heads together and come up with things and come up with a plan, we can make the change. It's not going to happen overnight, but all of this didn't happen overnight either. But I have hope.
Any last comments you would like to leave us with, Tamara?
No, I thank you all so much for having me. This has really been enjoyable. I said at the beginning, I'm always nervous, but of 45 years of teaching, I'm always nervous on that first day of school. And I figured that if I wouldn't be, then it wasn't going to be a good school year. Well, I loved every second of my teaching career. And I loved every second of this. I am appreciative, and I want to thank Sister Miriam for inviting and asking me to do this. And it's wonderful to meet so many of you. And I hope I see you again through some things. I'm here and I'm retired. So I do keep busy, but that's okay. So please feel free to contact me, and thank you again.
As we go, we just want to say this has been a wonderful evening, and thank you so much. Thank you, all of you, but thank you especially for coming to be with us, Tamara, and we hope that you consider yourself a sister to us. So thank you.